Okay, today we're going to discuss a very interesting Rambam, which, as we know, the Rambam already in Perek Vov, and the next prokim discusses Amira la'akum, which is a very, very important issue and a very interesting issue of how we do Amira la'akum, etc., Malkum Shvus, Malkum Mitzvah, and all the different things. But today's Rambam I want to discuss in Perek Vov Halacha Hey. The Rambam says as follows: Meis she'osu legoyim oroin. Someone passed away, and the goyim made an orim v'chofru lekever b'Shabbos, and they made him a kever on Shabbos. Oyeviu lechalilin lispid bohem, but they brought chutz letchum. They brought all kinds of instruments to be maspid. In Betzina, if it was done Betzina, that means nobody was walking around there. Yamtim b'rdei sheyasol matzu Shabbos. He covered them. Then you could actually bury the guy, and no problem. You have to wait b'rdei sheyasa after Shabbos, and then you can bury him, no problems. If Hoya Kever B'Sratio G'dela was in a big area, V'oren al Gabov Cholayrim V'Shavim Eimrim Shezah Nochrim, the Goyim are doing. So Rambam says Shezah Nochrim Oisim Achshav B'Shabbos L'Pleinehu, that they're saying I'm doing it for this Eid. Harezele Yikobe B'Oisa Yisrael Edomas. That Eid should never get buried in that area. They got to take him somewhere else. If they should be Farhesya, it's not a Farhesya. We're done with Sinna, no. But Farhesya you can't do it. But you can actually go ahead and bury somebody else. You have to wait b'rdei sheyasu. It takes to dig the caver. And the thing and everything like it. Now this Rambam first came to my attention many years ago, when those of you who know, one of the most interesting ways of figuring out halacha, of course, is to see what happens in Lameden v'halacha l'pi ma'aseh. There is a sefer called Shabbos Lekatshoy, written by a general by the name of Rabbi Tzvi Telsner, who was the head of the Agudas Rabbonim, a big goyen. I heard it from my father. He told me, remember, even as a kid, he was known. He wrote many svarim. And what happened was as follows: in New York, they were delivering meat. The goyim, the goyish drivers, were delivering meat on Shabbos to the butcher shops. They had the keys to the butcher shops. They would drive on Shabbos to the meat places, leave the meat by the Yiddish butcher shops, and then go home. And this went on for quite a while, until this Rabbi Dushowitz found out about it. He put a whole ad in there. There was the Morgen Journal the Tog, that you can't do this. It's Isa Osam and Adin. You're not allowed to do it. It's Chil Shabbos b'Far Hesya, and it's Osugoma, Isugoma. Of course, the Rav HaMachshir of these meats was a big Talmud Chacham also. The week after, put in another advert. And this went tit for tat for a whole few weeks, backwards and forwards. And then eventually, it was disbanded. And this Rav Dushowitz, Olav HaSholem, put together a sefer called Shabbos Lekatshoy, where he puts all the halachic regarding halachic decisions that brought him to the conclusion that this is an Isur Gomer, you're not allowed to do it. And he published it. And he writes in his Akdama, why am I publishing this? That people should not say that something as bad as this was done, and with the Shosker Rabbanon, since no one said anything, as a result of that, they didn't care. So I'm writing and showing you that we were moiche and we tried our best. And Baruch Hashem, I think at the end, it stopped. That was the first time I saw this Rambam. Now, interestingly enough, if you actually take a look, the Gemara is in Shabbos, and the Gemara has a whole discussion at the end of Shabbos, where the Gemara talks about this whole business. And there's a very famous Ran also on this. It says the Gemara as follows. Gemara is in Kuf Nun Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows. Machshichna Mishnah in the Kuf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Machshichna la tchum lefakech al iskikala, v'al miske hames lahavi le'oren v'tachrich. Then the Gemara says, Nochish Evi Chalinu b'Shabbos la yitben Misuel. Elam came bo mikorov. So Gemara has all discussion. What does makom korov mean? Chutzat chum not chum. Then you have the shaila from Shusar Achas Shusar Rabim. Also layoroin. They made a menorah. V'chofru lekever. And they made a kever. You cover Beisol. You can bury him in it. Says the Gemara of Yisrael, if it was done specifically for Eden, well, you cover by Oilomis. You shouldn't actually bury. Now, we know, Ms. Gemara, Sayin Beitzer, Sayin other places, that on Yom Tov you're allowed to bury, be Yom Tov Rishon, Alidei Amamin, that you bury through Goyim. The Goyim, same thing, Shabbos, all right, this is a Misa, but Yom Tov is a Nisalav. The Goyim can do whatever they have to do. You will matter them everything. We should cover a mess. You will matter everything to do. What about Shabbos? So Teisvis in Babakame, that Pei Aleph, comes along and says a very interesting thing. Teisvis comes along and says, the Lechura, why shouldn't we get the Goyim to bury on Shabbos? I'll be zoyin a mess. We don't want the mess to hang around. So why don't we get him buried by the Goyim, just like we have by Yom, by Wachimacall, just like you have it by Yom Tov? Teisvis Babakame Pei Aleph or Madallah. So Teisvis is a very interesting thing. So Teisvis says that Moses and Beit Tzedavah b'Yom Tov Sheni Yasku b'Yisrael, Fil b'Yom Tov Sheni Shosh Hashanah, Kol Shkei Milo D'Shoya Dinochi Yisur D'Raisa b'Shabbos, Yidpish B'Alochos Gdeis v'Shom Minam Al Yisrael b'Yom Tov Sheni Rosh Hashanah. Umihu Zak Teisvis Ein Zekal V'Chema the Minadin Havali LeMishva the Minadin. It should be permitted linkber mes b'Shabbos, that you're allowed to bury a mess on Shabbos. Elo lefi shu mechur umegune umizbayesh shenikbar b'Shabbos shenase be'isur Shabbos afilu alidei nochri. That even that you get a goy, if you would get a goy to do it, it would be the loshna, unbelievable loshon. It's mechur, it's mechur. Disgusting, megune, and the fellows mizbayesh and nikva b'Shabbos, shenase be'isur Shabbos afilai deinochi. And then he quotes Gemara in Kuf Nun Aleph, and he says, "V'teida the meshari karmelis you can move my karmelis because we say go to cover Rabbi Shadechel Isashel Divreihem. So therefore the kosh can have the mishul likai deinochi. Maduchi will be matter, and he said the Rabbanon. So why shouldn't we matter? Now, what's interestingly to note that the Ran in Shabbos comes along and asks the following thing. Says the Ran goes whole business about Lish the Daisa and the Rabbanon. And the Ran says as follows. That which we say that the Chalilin you shouldn't do it. Boy, Elam shouldn't get buried at all. The Dafka Oisi Yisrael Shenasa B'Shvilei. Oh Yisrael Echad Shenasa B'Shvilei. Muta Miyad. The Rambam says you have to wait, but he comes along and says muta miyad v'leibinon afilu b'deishiyasu. The heavy raya mashik also with the sefter that nochi sheivichem b'Shabbos v'sol le'yispa ma'isi v'sol v'sol achem muta. Also le'yor v'chovel esakeva le'ikva b'ma'isi v'sol v'sol achem muta. With the lake ton ever le'ikva b'yolomis that the sefter doesn't say that. V'oit ktoni nochi v'chal le'yispa b'hen le'yisi v'sol b'chalin le'nimsel elo b'deishiyasu. Okay. Which is the Shittas Rambam. V'acherim choyel kiv v'oim and the Chabad say l'lei mekilim b'hochi ela b'isur d'Rabbanon. We only take a nisa d'Rabbanon, not a nisa d'Raisa. Ava b'isur d'Raisa loy. The Perek ain't sod the Gemara Beitzer says b'feiros le'aminim b'Gemara mutar l'sol ache ela b'chutz l'tchum. Ava sheirim b'chubar, and we're worried that the goy may have taken out the Perek and sent it to the Yid on Yom Tov. I mean, also l'evnam asurim. We don't make any difference who it is being done for. the goy is making the fruit for this guy, for Reuven or for Shimon? Alma, says the Ran. This is what the important part is. Kol Shana says, Meleches Isa Deraisa B'Shvil Yisrael. If a Malacha Deraisa was done for a Yid, Le'Maflegina Ben Yisrael Acher, Lo'oise Shenase Hamlocha B'Shvila. That means if an Isa Deraisa was done, we don't make any difference whatsoever Ben Yisrael Acher, Lo'oise Shenase Hamlocha B'Shvila, that the person that was done for him. That means which is not the Rambam. The Rambam says another person, you can do it. Das Rambam, and it brings our Rambam. Interestingly to note what the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch actually says. So according to the Ran, if this guy was driving the meat and the Moshel on Shabbos, what should we call it? So whoever the meat is done for, there it's not just for the balabos, but it's for all the people going to buy the meat. And then we also have an Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe in Shin Yud Aleph says something very interesting. Shin Yud Aleph is called the Ches. The Alter Rebbe comes along and says, "By moving the mess, I feel like they nochri, tell a nochri to be taken this from Shus HaYochid to Shus HaRab, is osur." And he says the same thing that Teisha says. Mishum dignayu lemes sheyemu abriyas neschalalav Shabbos chilul gomor af shenasa hachilul aydei nochri. Even though the chilul was done through a goy. Now, what was the goy? What did the goy do wrong? So let's say he told him to do it. Amira lakum is only nisad rabbonos. You can nisad deraisa. Mashiach Carmel is how can you do Hashem meklam malacha? We can do suffering. It's only the suffering. And this is a Torah Sodom. This is a Ramban. Ramban says the same nekuda, that we don't want to say if someone mechal Shabbos, they should say shegnayu sheyemer abrius nischalal of chilul gomor. So any time you have a situation where people are going to find out that because of the Yid there was echte chilul Shabbos, so you have clearly Alter Rebbe from the Torah Sodom, and the Ran in Megillah in Shabbos comes along and says that you can't do it. And the Alter Rebbe himself in Shin Chav Hei, where he brings this Ran, and he says as follows: that noch Shevi b'Shabbos derech Shus HaRabim Chalil and Osam in Yisrael. That means that Isa Deraisi went from Shus HaRabim to Shus HaYochid. Keva Shenasam Isa Shel Teira leYisud B'Hem. Since an Isa Shel Teira was made, leYisud B'Hem leYos Yisrael. Nobody should use it. They should Shabbos. You're not gaining anything by it. Everybody knows who's Rosh Hashanah. Should play in Israel. Doesn't give any reason why. Says that Alter Rebbe. I'm sorry. Chaf Simen Shikot Chaf Aleph. Ba'afel fi Asvara Rishena. Lechmir Chacham Mashois Anoch Adov Me'atzmei. Avim Kibel Lavz Kodesh Shabbos Kodesh Aschar. Lekabel Zman. Emes Yafa Bishos Verhesje. Afilo Anoch Ischiyem Shel Lekabel Yisrael Eze Yevas Ba'atzmei. Afilo Gabe Mes Mutter B'Zemen Adin. El Shenocha In Lahachmir. Avga bechai ledivre hakoil shloyene mimenu eilomis shun adam b'Yisrael kol shenischalol beShabbos adei hanochim befarhese adei amis Yisrael. That if the Yid told him to go ahead and to do it, afilu osem nochim b'kablones shein be'ikem isradin. That means even if it was done through kablones and everything else, if it was done, says the Alter Rebbe Klor. There had been Yem Atzmei, Shleihanesh El Janoch Avgabel Divra Shleiyene Mimenu Eilomis Shum Adam Yisrael Kol Shenischalol Bei Shabbos Adinoch Farhese Idea Miris Yisrael. So therefore, even if you have Mamash Goy doing it, and there's no problem whatsoever. Now the question which is brought up by many Achainim, What about Yom Tif? Why by Yom Tif are we so makel? So the Aruch HaShulchan comes along and says something very interesting. He says, by Shabbos, we're not makel on anything. There's nothing on Shabbos that's mutter. Sayisha de Rabbi Nonon, Sayisha de Raisa. You're not allowed to do anything. When you talk by Yom Tif, you see that Bishul is mutter, Peitzoi is mutter. So therefore, Mitzat Kavod Hames, so the Chacham came along and said that Mitzat Atzoras Hames is Nishas Yifrelach, that you should actually go ahead and you should actually go ahead and do it. Mashenken Shabbos, where you have the Poil, as Vitesva says, it's Mechuler, and it's Mizbayish that he's in a kaver, which was done through Chilul Shabbos. So here we see that the Rambam clearly begins, the Rambam is a bit makel on the subject. He says very clearly that if the Nisan Deraisa is being done, and if it's Farhesia, no one can have any Hanoi Lomis, and one should not, and anyway, Chas V'Sholem uses as a heter.